Welcome to Mo Wilde. Welcome everyone that's watching at home. It is my absolute pleasure to be joined by Mo Wilde, author of The Wilderness Cure today. Award-winning author, I should say. So congratulations, Mo, on publication of your book and the Andre Simon Award that you were, what was that, last week? That you were presented?
It was last week, and there can't be anybody more shocked and surprised than I was.
I'm not surprised because it's a brilliant book, but I know it must be a strange feeling having it out there in the world and having people reading it and giving you feedback. How's it been for you?
Yes, that is strange. And I remember there was a point when I was writing it, as I got deeper and deeper into myself, as I wrote it, thinking, oh,
Mm,
this feels quite tender. This is a bit of an edge. How much am I happy to share with the outside world?
yeah.
And I had to sort of consciously think about that and then uncross that.
Yeah. How did you overcome that? Because there'll be a lot of people watching who are authors or aspiring authors. I think there's a lot of us who are struggling through that at the moment. How much of myself can I put out there into the world through a book? Do you have any tips for anyone?
Take a deep breath.
Always help. Breathe.
Yes, take a deep breath, because I think it's what really connects you to people and is that authentic experience. We know when people are putting it on or blagging a bit or pretending to be people that they're not. Most of us have got really good bull detectors.
Yeah.
And I think when you are, you can only be yourself. And when you speak from the heart and speak with honesty and, the truth of who you are, I think that's that people really connect with that. And you have to decide at some point, am I as a writer, prepared to, to reveal that. I mean, there's a lot I didn't say about myself.
Yeah. Maybe save that for future books. You never know. Keep something up your sleeve. And that's, I think, so for those of you that haven't read the book at home, first of all, highly recommend that you do. The Wilderness Cure is almost a memoir of a year where you will eat only foraged wild food, seasonal, here in Scotland. So again, for those of you that don't live in Scotland, Scotland is quite cold a lot of the year. It can be very damp, can be very grey, can be beautiful as well in its dampness. And one of the things that you touched on there was, when you're authentic, people are able to connect. I was able to connect with this book almost immediately on a subject that I knew nothing about and would have, I think, if it had been written by someone else or written differently, very much struggled to connect with and feel a part of and think maybe I could do that, because I quite quickly during the book thought, why am I not doing this? Why didn't I know that we could do this? I thought in terms of foraging, I might be lucky to find a few leaves. I didn't know I could create a meal, let alone 3 meals a day and snacks, when you know what you're doing. So yeah, your authenticity definitely helped me to connect with the book. And I know the feedback that we seem to be getting is that many people are picking up this book and reading it and thinking, this is a revelation. I didn't know that we could do this here in Britain. I didn't know that we had access to this amazing deli of food just right here on our doorsteps, whether we're in the city or the countryside.
I think what I really didn't want to do was to write a guidebook for foraging. Because there's some really great books out there, and lots of my contemporaries in the Association of Foragers who also teach have written really good guidebooks and things. But what I really wanted to address was the why. Because in the UK, a lot of people see foraging as some sort of either a bit of a yuppie hipster thing, trendy thing to do, or a bit of a rural middle class Barbara Wellies sort of thing.
Yes.
And it is neither. It is for many people in many parts of the world, wild food is still where they get their nutrients from.
Yeah, it's
thousands of people around the world can only afford to buy calories. Rice, flour, corn, maize, that sort of thing, and they're still foraging for the vegetables and fruits and things that give them their nutrients. And so when you look at things that are happening in terms of food security, and we just had a little taste of it with Beast from the East, and then COVID, and then Brexit, and all those lorries queuing from Dover, and people talking about, how it's going to affect the food supply. But, imagine if you'd been in a Ukrainian town surrounded by Russian tanks and the food supply had been stopped. So we forget that remembering where we came from and remembering all of these foods. And during that year, I ate over 300 species of plants, over 87 species of fungi, a lot of seaweeds as well. And yes, I did have to eat fish and shellfish and game. But it's important knowledge to remember and connect with. But I think most of all, what I wanted to do is to show how this connection to the land through looking for food, which is something that is primal in all of us, regardless of race, gender, color, creed. It's really essential to all of us. What it does is just to connect us on a very intimate level with nature and what is around us day by day as we go out and look. And that is what I found so revelatory for me. And as the year progressed and my own connection got deeper and deeper, so I was more impassioned to speak about many of the different issues that affect all of us in our relationship with this beloved planet, rather than just, you can eat this, you can eat that.
Absolutely. And that is exactly the effect the book had on me. It wasn't so much, now I know exactly what these plants look like and I know what I can eat today, I know where to go and find it. It was, there are elements of that in there. It's lovely how it's set out, month by month, so you can almost follow along. My sister's reading it just month by month, so she's doing the year along with you now, a year after, and she's loving doing that. But it really did just inspire me to begin to remember that foraging and wild food is something that we have always done on this land, and we've forgotten it. The last few decades, centuries perhaps even, we've slowly been moving away from that. And there's a paragraph in the book that has stuck with me, and I must have thought about it every day since, where you speak about Indigenous people and how we are so far removed from our own Indigenous past, where other countries are desperately trying to preserve that, often against persecution and erasure and their land being taken from them. No one has done that here in Scotland. No one has taken our land from us as such. We've built on it, we've almost taken it away from ourselves, but we've forgotten that we have access to this, and we've forgotten that we can do it. In the book, I think he said, if you can tell the difference between a lettuce and a cabbage, you can go out and find some food.
That is true.
Yeah.
At some point when you were around 1.5, you learned that this round red thing was a tomato, this round red thing was an apple.
Yeah.
There's slight differences between them. And yeah, I do say to people, if you can tell the difference between a cabbage and a lettuce, you have the power to do this.
Yeah. And it's a very, it can sound quite gushing, but it's a very inspirational book. And I know everyone that has read it has said the same thing, that they have just felt this instant connection to the outside. And I'm seeing it now when I go for a walk with my little girl, or even if I'm driving somewhere and I look at, the weeds that are growing beside the road. I think, gosh, well, you can eat that one and that one. Maybe not if it's quite beside the road, but you could in a push. It's really changed how I look at the environment around me, which is amazing. And that's what makes that book so exciting for me, because I know, so we're starting a read along. For those of you at home, some of you might be joining in with it next week. I'm so excited to watch other people have these revelations as they read. So for some of us, I guess I've never been, I would say I'm outdoorsy, I'm connected to nature, I love animals, I'm vegan, I'm this, I'm that, but I have never had a connection like this with nature. But for you, growing up in Kenya and all around the world, it sounds like you have just since day dot been so naturally connected to your environment, but you're still managing to deepen that, which is another lesson that I got from the book, was that, you know, you are a forager, a research herbalist, an ethnobotanist, you're a founding member of these associations, and it's easy to think, okay, well, yes, of course you can do this because you are an expert, but the book is very much your evolution. There's always...
Yes, I don't think of myself in that way as this expert, though. And I think that's probably because as you get older, you still feel about 20 inside the whole time.
Yeah.
And, you know, the reason that, yes, you know, I loved being outside as a child, and I loved the plants, and I was fortunate that there were some, you know, women that, you know, told me about plants and things like that. It was always something I was interested in. You know, but I also spent my, you know, late teens, early 20s, you know, in a city in London for a while, you know, sort of disconnected, and then got, you know, then I got into the, you know, the drudgery. I would say there's, you know, the love of my children, but the drudgery of being a single parent, trying to make a living, trying to make ends meet, trying to be there for other people the whole time. And, you know, and that at that point, sometimes, you know, it was just sort of maybe at a weekend getting one chance to go for a walk, or during the summer holidays, managing to go up to the Highlands and find this, you know, little wood by the sea where chanterelles would grow in the mosses, and a little stream would flow in, and there'd be mussels and sea lettuce, and you could heat up rocks and, you know, cook a little meal on it.
Yeah.
But, you know, most of the time I was working really hard. And in fact, I started teaching foraging because I was always looking for some extra cash, you know, because I didn't have any financial support from their father at all. And, you know, and I suppose when I started teaching, I knew a certain amount, you know, but I didn't know anywhere near what I know now. But the important thing is that whatever, you know, that you can teach whatever you do know well, and in a way that inspires people. And that when you don't know, that you're honest about it. So if I came across a plant I didn't know, and people would go, oh, what's that? What's that? I wouldn't make it up. I'd say, I don't know. Let's try and identify it. This is the process that you go through when you're trying to identify a plant. Or if I'd made a mistake and then suddenly realized I'd make a mistake, I'd say, oh, that plant back there that I told you was such and such. In actual fact, I was wrong. It's such and such. And the reason is because of why. And this also reminds us to be humble, because it's only by being too overconfident that you make mistakes and poison yourself.
Absolutely.
And then as people started to come back on walks more than once, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be telling the same stories unless I up my game.
Yeah, absolutely.
and so then that made me pay more attention to, you know, the species that I didn't know, and the small variations between things. And gradually over time, you know, I'm going to be 60 this year in October. I'm going to be 60. And I say to people, you know, if you learn one new species a week, you know, at the end of each year, you've got 50, say you had a 2-week holiday. So in 2 years, you've got 100. In 4 years, that's 200. So you can imagine that by the time you get to 60, even though you still feel 20 inside, some of it ought to have sunk in.
Yeah, you'll have learned a thing or two. And that is, you know, the other thing I took from this book is never too late. You don't have to have grown up knowing this stuff, around people that know this stuff. You don't have to live in the countryside. You don't have to be a certain age. You don't have to go all out and, you know, do a year. It's fantastic that you did, and it's so interesting to read how that was and how challenging that was. But you just, like you said, when you were, being a solo mum, you find those snippets where you can, you get those moments of connection wherever you can, and it's always worth it. It's always worth learning about what's growing outside in my garden. dandelions. I didn't know until I read your book that, you can eat those. You can use those for such a variety of medicinal purposes. And I'm there, historically have been spraying weed killer on them, thinking, oh, I want my lawn nice. What we've lost the plot in many ways. But
and up until the early 1900s, all cookery books would give you a recipe for a dandelion salad, which we would eat in the same way that in the Mediterranean people have a rocket salad, or and they would give you a recipe for wilted greens, where you would steam your dandelion greens and have them with butter, salt, and pepper.
Yeah.
You can obviously roast the roots either as a vegetable or dry roast them and make a sort of coffee substitute. And just the other day, a friend of mine was saying that they had a urinary tract infection, and was there anything natural? And I said, yes, dig up some dandelions and eat the whole plant, leaves and roots, preferably raw with a little vinegar or something to help with the taste.
Yeah.
That should sort you out in no time.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think, even again, on the health front, as someone who has chronic health problems, I feel so much more empowered now, realizing that plants really can help, and they don't come with all the horrible side effects that medicines do. I was someone that felt like I've tried everything. I've tried this drug and that drug. I've tried so many things, and I've been so out of control of my body. And now, having read your book and spoken to you a couple of times now, I've been lucky enough to have a good chat with you. And I think, gosh, I have a lot more power than I thought I did. And it's all on my doorstep. It's all there and ready and waiting for me to realize, hey, come and pick me. Have a try of this, a bit of that leaf, make a tea out of this, and see how you go. And again, I think that's what makes me so excited for this book to be out there in the world, because I know, as well as being just a really entertaining read, it's so intriguing, watching this year unfold and the challenges that you face and your honesty about how it feels. It's also just a brilliant resource for everyone. Everyone can stand to make their lives better from learning, even if it's just a little bit, just 2 or 3 plants that they can incorporate. Can't rave enough about it. But it's,
we're very lucky. Plants have been doing chemistry for millions of years, and because they're rooted in the ground, they seek balance. They can't, if there's trouble, they can't run off and hide in a gated community, or zip off on a plane to another country or something like that. They're stuck there. And so what they do, a lot of what their chemistry is about modulating and managing what's going on around them. And we evolved so much later than them, eating plants and mushrooms and seaweeds and other creatures, and we evolved in such a way that our bodies know exactly what to do with plants. Nobody worries about the dose of vitamin C if they eat an orange, and if they fancy a second orange, they don't go, what about the dose?
I know.
Well, our bodies will take what they need from plants. So they're much more gentle, much more tolerant. But it just, when you realize what their gifts are, you realize that nature isn't this red in tooth and claw drama that you see on television, where most people experience their nature, but it's an incredibly generous and benevolent world, that we belong to at the moment, while it's still there. And we are remiss in our roles as stewards and guardians, and giving that care back. And I think more than anything else in the book, what I'm trying to get across to people is that sense of reciprocal relationship. When you love something or someone, you truly care for it. But if you don't know or spend time with that person, it's very difficult to still feel warm and caring towards them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was the one thing. So I've written that down, and I've got that set as one of our read along challenges. You know, I remember so distinctly you saying that to me, and that has stuck with me. It's another thing I thought about every day. If you love something, to nourish that love, you have to spend time with it, and that's where so many of us are going wrong. You know, there's so much damage that comes from the disconnect between us and nature, and thinking of nature as a separate entity rather than us as being part of nature, which we are. We're part of this food chain, this system. You know, we give to the plants, you know, when we die, when we pick this, when we spread this seed, when we do that, and they give to us. And it's the same, you know, and I know you touched on, you know, eating meat, and that it's not your preference, but when it's done in a sustainable way, when you honor that life that has been given, everything seems to fall into place. But I think so many of us are just so disconnected from nature. We see ourselves as humans in nature. We forget that we're an animal that exists in nature.
Yeah.
And that,
yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, you know, this isn't really the sort of time to go into it, but having been a vegetarian for so many years and feeling very strongly about you know, animal cruelty and intensive farming, it was different having to go back to eat meat. But you know, there are, you know, it's not a black and white subject, and you know, you have to look at things you know, in the whole context of land and what we do and everything. I mean, at the moment in Scotland, you know, they realise that we have 3 times more deer than the carrying capacity of the land. So we have to choose between deer or forests, you know. So there is this, you know, there's a difficult balance.
Yeah.
And the difficulty with social media now is that everything gets very polarized into black and white.
I'm very guilty of this.
And you know, and that can be very emotive as well. And I think in the, you know, in the book, in the Wilderness Cure, you know, as I go through the months, and many of these questions come up in my mind, and I talk about them in the book, because I think I've you know, must have touched on almost anything possible to have an opinion about. I think, you know, what I'm very clear on is that I don't have answers, but what I'm good at doing is saying, you know, here's the complexity of the question.
Absolutely.
And you know, through that, you know, and not one size fits all anyway, ever.
That was, yeah, very valuable for me, because I think that a lot of people in my generation, I'm sure we are very black and white. This is wrong. If you do that, you're wrong and you're bad and you have to do this. And it is just not that simple. And, you know, reading your book, and as someone, yeah, who can be very black and white, I have seen so much value in examining the grey, and in realizing that there is no such thing as this is wrong and this is right. There's better ways for some people, there's other better ways for others, in different time periods, different locations. It's all very nuanced, and you captured that so well in just expressing how you feel about the subject. There was no, for a book that, you know, could be seen as a resource in some ways, at no point did I feel told what to do or overwhelmed or preached to, which is brilliant and so refreshing. I think that is probably why people are connecting with it so deeply. They feel very welcomed into the discussion, rather than being told, I am a forager, here's what you can do and can't do.
I would never presume to know the answers. You know, you know, I think the more the older that you get and the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And the more that you have to listen to that balance between, you know, what is factual and visible and seen, and also, you know, the movements of the wild spirit within us all and within nature, which is not so easy to put into words and to make tangible, but is what, you know, is the difference between us being lying there being dead and inanimate, and us being alive, you know, that living spirit.
Yeah.
So and you know, we're all part of the same planet. We really are all part of the same world.
I'm so
That didn't stop one reviewer saying that she Loved the book, but could have done without some of my opinions. I thought, well, if I'm going to write a book, surely I can put my opinions in my book.
You would think that would be an acceptable place to, to voice your opinions. And actually, when we spoke before, just before I'm conscious of the time, but just for the people, watching, because there are a lot of writers among our Tandem community, you touched on that in our former chat where you said you could write, if you look at your favorite book in the world, a book that is recognized as an absolute classic that everyone loved, there's still going to have some 1-star reviews. There's still going to have someone saying,
that's how I prepared myself. I went and looked at all the books I truly love, like Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass, and I went and read all her 1-star reviews, and I thought, gosh, if people can say that about that book, they are going to, I will get some 1-star reviews. There will be people who, don't like my book. But if my heroes can cope with 1-star reviews, so can I. Exactly.
And I loved that. That was such a good prompt for me as a struggling writer who's thinking, can I do this? Am I qualified to do this? Are people going to hate this? Probably some people might, but
some of them might. Back in the 1970s, when I was a teenager, there was this great inspirational speaker called Leo Buscaglia, and he used to say, being on Earth is like being in a fruit bowl. You have incredible peaches, and beautiful yellow bananas, and you can be the most gorgeous, delectable, luscious peach, but if people just prefer bananas, there's no way you can turn yourself into a banana.
Absolutely.
So just be the best peach and wait for the peach lovers to arrive.
And they will come for you. Exactly.
It's very simplistic, but it is so true. And the difficulty is that if you are afraid, you don't get to do anything in life. Fear, I think, is the single most limiting factor.
Yeah.
Because it totally paralyzes your energy, not just your mind and your body, but it paralyzes, your energy, your chi. And that doesn't mean that to live fearlessly, you don't ever experience fear. But, through time, you learn to just take a deep breath and just do it. I have a saying that really, I think probably comes from, childhood growing up in Africa. And I don't remember where it came from, but the saying is basically, if there's no blood, it's not a crisis.
I love that.
If there's no blood, it's not a crisis. If somebody isn't, lying on the ground bleeding, then, there's probably a resolution. You're probably going to survive.
Absolutely. And that's so relevant for, so many of us exist in this fight or flight nervous state right now. And again, one of the best answers to that is take a deep breath, as you said, and go outside. Just go outside, breathe it in, remember that this planet is here to help rather than hinder. And
even in the middle of winter, you can go for a walk and be feeling really blue and all the rest of it, and nature will go, yeah, have some early primroses. What about a little bit of chickweed? Fancy some sorrel? Or I was in the park on Sunday, and it was like, how would you like some oyster mushrooms?
That'll do nicely, thank you. So for those of you at home that don't know, Mo has just started, so having concluded a year of living on just foraged foods here in Scotland, she's just commenced a new, 3 months, 6 months?
3 months this time, yes.
Foraging experiment with a much wider group of people, so some other willing participants, called the Wild Biome Project.
The Wild Biome Project, yes. Well, this came about because, during the book, as you'll read, I was recording the fact that I was doing, gut tests and things. And at the end of it, I carried on to see what would happen to my gut and my weight again afterwards. And but when I looked at the results and tried to get some help analysing them, of course, I realised that, 1 or 2 people, because Matt did it as well, doesn't really make science. So over the last year, I've managed to talk 26 people, well, 25, including me, is 26 of us, to eat wild food only, some for 1 month and some for 3 months. And we're being part sponsored by Zoe, which is the health study run by Professor Tim Spector. Yeah. And they're going to be analysing our gut microbiomes and blood fat and blood sugar against a controlled population. So it can be really interesting to see. We feel that adding wild foods into the diet is good for us. Is it scientifically? Can we prove that it is? Yeah. So, and that's part of the study. And the other part, we're doing, other blood tests and really good record keeping and research, and having to crowdfund to do it, because none of us have a big research stipend or anything. So we're running a GoFundMe campaign for the Wild Biome Project, and so we just started, and we finish on the summer solstice. And now we'll see this time if it's a bit more of a scientific approach.
Absolutely, which is such a first, and such a that will hopefully convert a lot more people into thinking, gosh, because people love a health. But, if this is what we've always supposed to have been, the way we've always supposed to have been eating, this could be the ultimate way to exist. This is, if you can prove, and I think it's a great sign that you felt so good doing it. I mean, I think when your body, and as someone who understands these bodily systems as well, you must have a good inkling that this is good for us. But it'll be so intriguing to see the scientific results. And absolutely, people at home, please do go and follow along on Instagram, donate if you can, because it's such a brilliant cause. And the Wilderness Cure is out now. In hardback as well, is that correct? So you can pick it up in both.
It's in hardback and at the moment, and audiobook, and then it comes out in paperback on the 30th of March this month. So yeah, not far away. Another week time, and the paperback will be out as well.
Exciting. So do pick up a copy. One final question before we run out of time: what's on the menu for lunch today? I'm intrigued to know.
I haven't got as far as lunch. I was sort of in a bit of a rush this morning because a couple of people phoned me quite early on. So at the moment I'm drinking a cup of herbal tea, and I've had some rather scabby sort of feral, windfall feral apples that I dried up over the winter, that came from a tree next to the River Almond that must have self-seeded a long time ago. So for lunch, I'll probably have some smoked pigeon and then a big salad, because that's that's what's out there at the moment.
Salad season. And so check out our read on cards. They'll be on the website. If you are interested in joining in with some of the challenges at home, one of the challenges is actually with recipe cards that you can check out. We'll put a link below in the description box below this video. And one of them is to go and gather ingredients for a soup, and one of them for a salad. And they're all very easily available, whether you're in the city, in the countryside, the coastline. There's a whole variety of recipes that we'll be putting up from Mo. So do check them out and get involved at home. Mo, thank you so much for your time and for writing this brilliant book. I've got it perched proudly beside me. Go pick up a copy at home if you haven't already. And yeah, thank you so much for your time and chatting to us. It's so appreciated. It's lovely to get an insight into the human behind the book.
You're very welcome. It's been a pleasure. And thank you everyone for reading it.